Ashley and welcome to my channel. As you saw in the intro, in today's video I'm going to be doing a reading vlog of the book Darker by 4 by June C.L. Tan, and I started this yesterday. So I'm currently on chapter 14, page 121. And I was a little nervous going into this book because I have read this author's other book, Jade, Fire, Gold, and I just thought that one was okay. I just didn't quite feel a connection to the characters that I wanted to feel. And that made me sad because one of my favorite things about reading is forming connections with the characters. And so that book was a little disappointing, but I believe in giving authors second chances. And it has happened to me before where I've read a book by an author that wasn't quite for me, but then I read another book by them that I loved. And so I'm hoping that's what will happen with this one. And I am happy to say that so far I am really enjoying this book, so I think that is going to be the case with this one. So our story follows three main characters, and the first character we are introduced to is Nikai, and he is a reaper. And so in chapter 1 you get introduced to him, and he is the head of the reapers, and he is currently overseeing the collecting of souls from a horrible 13-car pileup that happened. However, while he is doing this, the fourth king of hell shows up. And this is unusual because kings never show up for the collecting of souls. And then soon after the fourth king appears, another king appears, the first king. And these are the kings of hell. And so these two kings end up having a conversation. And the first king wants the fourth king to save one of the dying victims of the car crash. And he wants the fourth king to save the life of an unborn child and the mother. And the fourth king is reluctant to do this because they're not supposed to mess with stuff like that. But the first king reassures him and he says, no, I need you to do this because even fate doesn't want this child to die. And so the fourth king ends up giving in and he saves the life of the mother and unborn child. However, then at the end of chapter 1, the fourth king goes missing. And then our next chapter takes place 18 years later. And we are introduced to our second main character, Rui. And Rui is 18 years old and she is training at a school to become an exorcist. Because in this world, there are these beings that are sort of like demons or evil spirits that are called revenants. And certain people are born with spiritual power that are able to hone their powers and fight these monsters. And normal people can't see these revenants, only people with spiritual powers can see them. But the revenants will kill humans by sucking out their life energy, so that's why exorcists need to kill them. And so Rui wants to become an exorcist because her mother was killed by a revenant when she was 14 years old. And this revenant had a human face, which is very unusual and almost unheard of. And it's at the point where a lot of people just believe that it's a myth. But Rui knows otherwise. And so because she saw her mother get killed by this revenant when she was 14 years old, Rui is like very cynical and almost kind of grumpy as a character. But she's also very dedicated and is very clear that she's a hard worker. And you are also introduced to a couple of her friends in the book that makes it clear that despite her like cynical and grumpy exterior, that she is a good person on the inside. And one of her friends that we introduced to is Zizi, and he is a mage. So in this world, if you have spiritual powers, you either can become an exorcist or you can join the underground magic community and become a mage. And the exorcists just like kind of turn a blind eye to the mages. They just leave them alone as long as they're not doing anything dangerous or law-breaking. And so Rui, as an exorcist, she will go on patrols. And one night she shows up for a patrol, but she doesn't realize it has been canceled because there is actually a hunt going on for some dangerous revenants. So she ends up encountering a dangerous revenant. And also our third main character of the book, Yurin, also ends up being there as well. He actually attacks a revenant with a baseball bat because Yurin is the son of a prestigious exorcist family. But he is a black sheep of the family because he doesn't have any magical powers. And so this has always been a sore spot for him his entire life. And because of this chip that he has on his shoulder, he is like always getting into mischief. which in turns always gets him in trouble with his grandfather, who is the head of the family. And at the beginning of the book, Urien did something that was the final straw, and his grandfather said that he was going to send him away to a boarding school. And so Urien stormed out of the house in anger, and so he had this crazy plan that he was going to go capture a revenant. And so Rui ends up seeing him fighting the revenant with a baseball bat and was like, what in the world are you doing? Are you crazy? And so she starts fighting the revenant because she has actual exorcist powers. So Rui ends up fighting the revenant. But things take a bad turn, and she ends up becoming injured to the point where she can't fight anymore, and it looks like her and Urien are going to end up dying. And so in a desperate act, she ends up using this newly created spell to transfer her powers to Urien. And so he ends up being able to defeat the revenant. But Rui thought that the spell would only temporarily transfer her powers to him, but it turns out that the spell might be permanent. And so now he has her magical powers and she has no magical powers at all. And so she then turns to her friend Zizi for help because he was the one who created the spell. And so now the three of them have to figure out how to fix the situation. But the thing is, Urien is kind of happy now that he finally has magical powers, because all his life he has been ridiculed for not having magical powers. So that is where I'm at in the story, and as I mentioned, I am really enjoying it so far. It is definitely giving me Shadowhunter vibes, especially with the fights against the demons. The fights have been really cool to read about. There is a character who had a whip that reminded me of Isabelle from Shadowhunters. Yui herself uses swords that when she channels her spiritual energy through them, they glow red, which I think is really cool. I'm really excited to read more and to find out exactly what happened to the fourth king of hell. And I have a theory at the moment, but I'm not going to say what that theory is because I don't want to spoil anything and I could just be completely wrong. But so far, I am really liking all the characters. I am really liking Rui and Urien and Nikai. They're all so far very interesting. They all seem to have very interesting pasts too, and traumas that happened in those pasts. And I also am especially really liking Zizi's character as well. And it also seems like Rui has a crush on him, and he also might have feelings for her, so there's a little hints of romance there. And also Zizi has a cat named Mao that is a black cat that has made a couple appearances that is just super adorable, and I love when there are animal companions in books, so that just made me really happy. Also, this book so far is also giving me anime vibes, and it's reminding me specifically of Bleach and of Jujutsu Kaisen. And I find that very interesting because on the back of this book, where there's praise for all other authors, they also say that it's like an anime. So one of them says it's like a comfort anime that also isn't afraid to skewer you with angst and explosive fight sequences, which I 100% agree with so far. And then another one says it has nods to dark fantasy anime, which again, Jujutsu Kaisen, so I 100% agree with that. And I am a big fan of anime, and I was a fan of Bleach growing up, and I also really like Jujutsu Kaisen, so that has just been another enjoyable part of this book for me so far. Those are all my thoughts at the moment. As I said, I'm really enjoying it, and I think it is off to a very promising start, and I have very high hopes now. Hi, so I am back with a reading update on Darker by 4. So my last update was on Wednesday, and now it's Saturday. And I have made it to chapter 32, page 249, and I am loving this book. I am eating this up. I really wanted just to like binge this whole thing this morning, but I had to go grocery shopping, and I wanted to give another update before I finished this, so I controlled myself. And I am loving this book so much that this morning I went online and I bought the Fairyloot edition of this. So I think this was the April Fairyloot book, but I saw a book unboxing of this Fairyloot edition on YouTube, and the book, the Fairyloot edition of this, is gorgeous. And before seeing that unboxing, I was already interested in reading this book, but seeing that unboxing and that beautiful edition of that book brought this like to the top of my TBR. And right now, the prices for the Fairyloot edition of this book aren't too bad, so I caved and bought one this morning. And I know I still have a little bit left to read in this, but I can't really see anything happening that would make me hate this book. So if I get the Fairyloot edition before I put this video up, then I will put the unboxing of that book in this video at the end. But I am really loving our characters in this one, and I feel already attached to them and invested in them. I love Rui, Yurin, and Zizi. I just find them all very interesting to read about, and I just love the dynamic between Zizi, Yurin, and Rui. And especially Yurin and Rui, they are like total opposites. Rui is no nonsense, she's not afraid to speak her mind, and she's not very sociable. Whereas Yurin, he is the opposite. He's very outgoing, and he'll also say what he needs to say to get into people's good graces. So him and Rui don't really get along in the beginning and kind of hate each other. But then over the course of this book, they start to understand each other, and they're at the point now where they're kind of friends. And so that was just really heartwarming to see. And then Zizi is probably my favorite character so far. He is Rui's friend, and he's a mage, and he's kind of eccentric, but he's always wearing these different patterned silk pajamas. And he has a cute little cat named Mao, and I just love him so much. So I thought the three characters on here would have been Rui, Yurin, and Nikai, because those are the three that are blurbed on the inside flap. That this is actually Zizi and not Nikai, because he has the blue eyes and he has the wing tattoo that Yurin mentions seeing at one point on his back, and it's mentioned very early on that Nikai has blue hair. And I actually feel like Zizi is like the third main character in this book, and Nikai feels more like a minor character, because even though you have chapters from his perspective, you definitely don't get as many chapters from him as you do from Yurin and Rui's perspective. And so I feel like he hasn't really been in the book that much. There is a scene where he meets Rui for the first time, and I thought that scene was great. I loved reading their interactions. But other than that, I feel like his chapters have been kind of sparse, and that's probably the only complaint I have so far about this book. I would like more chapters from Nikai's perspective, because I feel like out of all the characters, he's the one that feels the least developed. But the chapters that we do get from him, I think, are very interesting and eye-opening, because in his chapters, you get to see more of the underworld and exactly how everything works in the underworld. But that's just a really small little nitpick. And then in addition to those four characters, there have also been some interesting side characters as well. In particular, there are two twins, and one of them goes to the exorcist school, and the other one is homeschooled because she makes exorcist weapons, and so like their whole family is known for being very knowledgeable about exorcist weapons and making them. And at one point there's a scene where the twins are making a weapon for Yurin, and I thought that was just a really cool scene to read. So yeah, those are all my thoughts so far. I'll probably end up finishing this either today or tomorrow, because as I mentioned, I don't have very much left, just a little over 100 pages. But before I read more of this, I want to do a little arts and craft. And this arts and craft is kind of loosely themed to this book, but I also just really wanted to make it. And so I'm going to make little ghost tea lights. So I've seen the tutorial for them on Pinterest, and they just look so cute. And I was thinking about saving this craft for spooky season, but the thing is, spooky season and fall is my favorite time of year, and I feel like I always try to jam too much into that short period of time, and then I end up not doing everything that I want to do because I try to do too much. So we're gonna make those in this video, because then also that way they'll be already made and I can use them during fall and spooky season. And I think they fit this book well, because this book is a supernatural book and there are reapers in it. And also, another small little detail that just makes this craft fit this book even more is at the beginning of this book, when you meet Zizi for the first time, Rui mentions how he's wearing these earrings that have little plastic dangling ghosts on them. And she actually got him those earrings as like a joke gift, but he wears them on occasion every so often, and I just think that's so cute, and that right there shows that he likes her. But I feel like the reference to ghost earrings just makes this craft fit the book even more. So I am back. I have finished Darker by 4, so I am back with my final thoughts. And I love this. I'm giving this 5 stars. I think this might be my second favorite book of the year now. I just love this so much. I love the characters. They all have my heart. I love the action. The fight scenes in here were really cool, and they really gave me anime vibes. And there was one scene in particular that heavily reminded me of a Bleach fight. Don't want to spoil it by saying exactly how it was like a Bleach fight, but I will tell you the chapter and page numbers. So it's chapter 34, page 260. So if you're interested in that, that's where you can find that. And then another thing that also heavily reminded me of Bleach was all the characters in this book, The Exorcist, they all have certain weapons that only they can use, and that's like the same thing that happens in Bleach. All the Reapers have certain weapons that are unique to them and that only they can use. And then I also love the romance in this book. So you have the romance between Zizi and Rui that is both sweet and angsty, and I just loved it. It has my whole heart. And then towards the end of the book, you also get a love interest introduced for Yurin. And even though we're just introduced to them, I am already 100% behind that pairing. And who it is that he ends up getting a crush on is just going to cause so much drama, and I'm going to be there for every second of it. And then another thing I really enjoyed is that I enjoyed the turn that the story takes. So in the beginning of this book, revenants are introduced as being evil. End of story. They're bad. They must be gotten rid of. But as the story goes on, you start to learn that that might not completely be the case. And so you enter that gray area where all the revenants might not be evil after all. And I think whenever a story leaves the black and white and goes into the gray area, it always makes things a lot more interesting and fascinating to read about. So I really like that this one did that it had that twist, because I wasn't 100% expecting it to do that. And then the ending of this book was action-packed and explosive, and it is the first book in a duology, so of course it ended on a cliffhanger where all our main characters are sad, which made me sad. But I'm also really, really excited to read the next one when it comes out. So those are all my thoughts. I would definitely recommend this book. I especially recommend it if you are an anime fan, because the anime vibes in this book are very strong, especially the Bleach vibes. And I also recommend it if you are a Shadowhunter fan too, because the battles and demon fighting also reminds me a bit of that series as well. So that is that, and now before I end this video, so I had mentioned earlier that I was loving this so much that I went and I ordered a copy of the Fairyloot version of this book, and that came in, so I'm going to end this video with unboxing this. I love these edges so much. Oh, look, the person who had this before put some tabs in it. And then the end pages, which are also stunning. I love how it has Zizi wearing his little ghost earrings. And the naked hardback, also gorgeous. And the back, which the butterflies and the stars do play a little bit of a role in the book, which is cool because I first saw someone unbox this version of this on YouTube, and I was wondering if the stars and the butterflies would come into play at all, or if it was just a pretty cover. And they do play a little bit of a role in the book. And then the reverse of the book cover is the original book cover, which I think is really cool because I really like the original cover too. So that is that. I am really excited to have this. I really love this version. I think it's really pretty. Alright, so that is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. If you have read Darker by 4, let me know down below what you thought about it. And until next time, bye!